Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the story of Charles Swales and the murder of Mary Ann Swales, which took place in Newcastle Upon Tyne in 1858. This story is much shorter than normal as there was very little information to be found about it, and it also has a somewhat strange outcome, but I hope you will still find it interesting. But before we begin, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. And I would just like to add, as I always do now, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. Due to the year that this took place being 1858, the backstory of those involved is pretty much non-existent, as there are very few census forms to find, so very little details to find, so it is very, very basic. Charles Swales lived and worked in Newcastle Upon Tyne. He was described as a hawker of paper plates and trays. His age was not mentioned, so his date and place of birth are also unknown. He was not described by anyone as a heavy drinker, but he was known to drink quite a lot. Mary Ann Swales, the victim, was born in around 1829. Her place of birth is unknown. She was married to Charles Swales, and the couple had at least 2 children together, and they lived in Clayton Street in Newcastle. Mary Ann was described as a known heavy drinker. On Friday, August the 13th, 1858, Mary Ann arrived at the Thornton Hotel in Newcastle with her 2 young children. She spoke to Anne Milburn, asking her if she would take them in, telling her that she was dying and that her husband Charles had ill-used her. Anne took her inside and sent for a doctor. The first doctor who was sent for did not arrive, so Anne sent for Mary's husband, who she had heard was in a beer house in Peel Street in Newcastle. She also sent for another doctor. Mary Ann's husband arrived before the doctor, and he went to see her, but no one knew what was said between the couple at that time. After the doctor had seen Mary Ann, Charles went for her medicine, which was a bottle of some kind and some pills. Mary only took one of the pills, and then she talked a little to Anne about her husband and children. She sadly did not get any better, and she died at around midnight that night. After her death, Charles was arrested on suspicion of causing his wife's death by ill-using her, with some reports saying that he had been accused of kicking and punching her. The inquest was opened at Westgate Police Station on the Saturday evening. The jury had viewed the body of Mary Ann Swales, and it was stated that her face and body was very discoloured, and that this was said to have been caused by kicks and punches from her husband. Anne Milburn said she was the wife of the landlord of the Thornton Arms public house in Newcastle. Now, I must add at this point that the public house is sometimes described as the Thornton Hotel and other times as the Thornton Arms, and I was sadly unable to confirm which was correct. Often what you would find in old newspaper articles was that the names and details were very different in each different account. And unfortunately I'm not very knowledgeable on the old lost pubs of Newcastle, so I really don't know which name is correct, so perhaps somebody listening does know and can let me know. Anne said she had identified the body as being that of Mary Ann Swales, who was around 29 years old and the wife of Charles Swales. She said Mary Ann lived with her husband and children in Clayton Street in Newcastle. She said on the night of August the 13th, Mary had arrived at the public house in a cab with 2 boys, her sons, who were around 12 and 5 years of age. The boys' names were never mentioned. She said Mary Ann said, "Will you take me in? I am dying." Anne said she told her that she would, and she said she took her and the children to the sitting room above the pub. She said Mary Ann told her she was very ill. She complained of her head and her chest, and she said her husband had done it. Anne said she sent a young girl to fetch a doctor, but none arrived. She had been told that Mary Ann's husband was in a beer house in Peel Street, so she sent someone to fetch him, and because the first doctor had not arrived, she sent out for another one herself. She said Charles arrived soon after. However, she did not say if he seemed concerned about his wife or not, but he did go up to the sitting room to see her. Anne said she did not follow him and did not know what was said between husband and wife. When the doctor arrived, she said Charles went for her medicine, and this was a bottle of some kind, but she did not know what, and some pills. She said Charles did not stay and left straight after delivering the medicine to his wife. Anne said she stayed with Mary Ann, and she told her that Charles had kicked her in the chest and that he had also blackened both of her eyes. She also talked about her two children, though Anne did not say what she had said. Anne said a short time after the doctor left, Mary Ann had died and the police had been sent for. Superintendent Donaldson said he had been told that Charles had ill-used his wife, and he had gone to look for him and had found him in the Newcastle area close to the public house. He said he had first arrested him on the charge of ill-using his wife. However, after her death, he had arrested him on a charge of causing her death by ill-using and beating her. It was not stated if Charles had denied or admitted to ill-using his wife, and no mention was made of any statement being made by him at all. No evidence was taken from either of the children of the couple, and no real reason was given as to why, so we can only assume that they had been questioned and that it was thought that they had nothing of any relevance to say. Dr. Blackett said he had been called to the public house at around 11:30 p.m. on the night of the 13th. He said Mary Ann appeared sober to him, but she was very unwell. Her husband, however, he said, was quite drunk. He said Mary Ann had told him she was dying, and Dr. Blackett said this had also been his opinion. And she had also told him that her illness was caused by her husband. He said he had sent the husband for some medication, and then he had left Mary Ann in the care of Anne Milburn. He said he was not able to determine the cause of death as he had not yet performed the post-mortem, and at this point the inquest was adjourned to allow the post-mortem to take place. The inquest was resumed on the following Tuesday morning. Dr. Septimus Rain said he had performed the post-mortem on the body of Mary Ann Swales. He said he had found the liver, heart and lungs to be a mass of disease, and this was a disease that had clearly been present for quite some time. It was his professional opinion that she had died due to effusion of blood on the heart and chest, which had been directly caused by the diseased organs. He continued by saying that he could find no evidence that any kind of violence had contributed to her death. He said she had not had any symptoms of head injuries prior to her death, and although she did have a black eye and facial discoloration, this had not been, in his opinion, linked to her death. And he said he believed that she had been a very, very heavy drinker. There was no further evidence given, and the coroner did not seem to address the jury at the inquest, and the jury retired for only a few moments before returning a verdict of death by natural causes, and Charles Swales was discharged. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Mary Ann Swales. As with many stories recently, this may simply have been a case of a pauper's funeral, as it seems unlikely, given the fact that both the couple seemed to be big drinkers, that the husband would have had the money for a funeral, and no other family members were ever mentioned who may have been able to pay. I did not find any evidence of a headstone anywhere in the area for Mary Ann Swales. Unfortunately, I was also unable to find any further details of Charles Swales after his discharge, so I'm not really able to say what happened to him or his two children after this. But I do have to hope that Charles was able to look after the children and that they did not end up in the workhouse, though I have to admit that the previous story of how the couple were both drinking and both ill, that it was possible that they would have ended up there anyway. This was a very curious case. From the beginning, Mary Ann claimed that her husband had ill-used her. However, no evidence was ever given to confirm this. The doctor at the inquest did say that she had bruising of some kind, but did not seem to confirm that this had been caused by violence, such as the kicking and punching that Mary Ann had claimed. And it seems that if the children had been spoken to about their parents' behaviour, they had not been able to confirm that their father ill-used their mother either. And the main cause of death, according to the doctor, was the disease within her body that had been present for some time, and he clearly felt that this was caused by her heavy drinking. So it does appear that Mary Ann would have died at some point in the near future anyway. But I do have to admit to finding it odd that Mary Ann accused her husband of beating her if there was not some truth in this. However, without evidence it seems this was never going to be proven, and the doctor's evidence about the disease she was suffering from would have left the jury with no option but to find in favour of natural causes. But was Charles entirely innocent? Well, that is only something that he would know. But what do you think? Do you think there was some truth in Mary Ann's claim that her husband ill-used her? Or do you think she simply made it up in the hope that it would make Anne Milburn take her in and look after her? There was evidence of bruising to her face and black eyes, but perhaps we have to consider the idea that this was caused by Mary Ann falling down in a drunken state. Do you think that could possibly be the case? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very sad and tragic story interesting. As said previously, it is quite a short story as there was not a lot of evidence given at the inquest. But I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.